Welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where each week you get to hear Sean Steele, professional CEO, growth mentor, and advisory board chair, unpack the strategies that successful founders have used to achieve scale in their businesses. Stay tuned as he interviews the entrepreneurs who've made it, learns from industry experts, and follows a group of founders still striving to scale.
G'day everyone and welcome to the Scale Ups podcast. I'm your host Sean Steele, and this is the podcast where we help first-time founders learn the secrets of scaling so they can fulfill the potential of their businesses, make big decisions with greater confidence, and of course maximize their value and impact that they can create in the world. I am joined today by Anneke Broek, founder and CEO of Rufus Coco. Anneke, those with pets in our audience are very likely to know your brand. I certainly know that my black Labradoodle Zoe runs around with your collars and leads. But for those who don't know your background, maybe if I can just provide a little bit of insight for our audience. And if I've got this right, you were 8 when you started breeding and selling mice to your local pet store for 40 cents each. And I love those stories when you think about that sort of time past. I remember I used to control the shirt ironing in our house for 50 cents each. And then once everybody got really comfortable, I started jacking up the prices because I knew everybody was attached to me doing it. But you then went into marketing, obviously post school and so on, into marketing. And by 23, were single-handedly running 300 David Jones fashion shows a year. And then you carried on in marketing, went into Blackmore's, if I'm not mistaken, senior roles in Apparel Group and in bonds. And then after your MBA and pregnant with your first child in 2008, I believe, that's when Rufus Coco was born?
It was.
Wow, amazing. And just the Rufus Coco journey. So you have taken from startup over the last 14 years to the largest privately owned pet business in the pet accessories category, selling directly into the grocery channels in Australia and overseas, which is quite meaningful to put that into context because most of your competitors would be large multinationals, but you're selling into Woolies and Coles in Australia, PetSmart and Amazon in the US, Pet Lovers in Singapore, just to name a few large bricks and mortar as well as online retailers. And one of the staggering things that I learned when we first spoke after we were introduced by Isha Oberoi, founder of Afia Care Services, was that 5 years ago you were selling about 1,000 products a day, and now you're selling about 4,500 products a day. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's hard to believe, actually. But
yeah. When you hear the numbers played back to you, how does that make you feel?
Humbled, really. My vision for Rufus Coco was to be an Australasian pet care brand selling, really fashionable, affordable, environmentally friendly products to pet lovers like myself, because I really couldn't find anything at the time. And, about, I suppose, 5 years ago, we went really global and we started to crack into the American market. And, that was one of the things that step changed our growth, along with many other decisions that we've made along the way. But it's humbling to hear those numbers and really where we are now, 13 years later, has kind of surpassed my initial expectation. But it's super cool too, because it gives a chance to reset, what impact I believe we can have in our business for pet owners, for the pet industry and for pets everywhere. So super cool.
What's the percentage? I always think about this as a landlord because I've got a few investment properties where the strata, body doesn't want to have pets in the building. And I think, are the stats like 60% or something of Australians have pets?
Yeah, actually over 63% of Australians have pets. 63. And COVID was, probably contributed the largest growth that will happen in our lifetime to pet ownership. So 45% growth of adoption, 23% growth, I think it is, of cats. And wow. So we are a country of people that have grown up loving animals and understanding and experiencing the benefits to both our physical and our psychological well-being. And I think I didn't really strike me how fundamental that was until I went to China, and we started for our first time in the Chinese market. And I went to go and train with a translator on some of our products. And I thought I was training on, some of the really cool natural ingredients that we have in our grooming products and the fact that we don't have parabens and all the nasties. And I thought I was training on all the ingredients. Actually, what they wanted me to teach them is how to wash a dog.
Wow.
And I just kind of went, okay, well, let's just go back to basics, because, pet
quite a
ownership
few steps back.
Yeah, that's quite a few steps back, exactly. So pet ownership is such a new, I mean, it's not new now, like it's 10 dog years, but, like in our culture, it's hundreds of years, in kind of the Western culture of pet ownership.
That's so interesting. So how does it compare in, say, Singapore and the States to Australia in terms of that sort of percentage of home ownership? Obviously, in Singapore, there's a lot of apartment living, so I imagine the animals might be a lot smaller. But what does the sort of pet ownership percentages look like in those markets?
Oh, gee, in America, I think it's 57%. So they're still very high. I can't recall with credibility the number for Singapore for you, but it's a lot lower.
Very interesting. So I know you've sort of alluded to it in a few of the comments you've made so far, but can you just take me back to the genesis of this business? So they're back there in 2008. What made you start Rufus and Coco?
Actually, I've always wanted to own my own business and run my own business. It was part of the reason I took myself back to do my MBA. I actually studied fashion, and I thought that would only get me so far, and I'd need some business acumen to be able to run a business. And so I'd always wanted to do it. And I was always trying to find the right time to do it. And in fact, one of my roles was as the general manager of Sportscraft. I was there for 6 months and made redundant, which was quite a kick in the guts at the time, but the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I kind of just thought, now is my moment. Now is my moment. I'm going to really take this opportunity to do this now. And interestingly, at the time, I had probably 5 business ideas that I was playing with. I had the idea of larger women's clothing. I still believe that that's a massive gap that's not been well filled in this market. I had the idea of all sorts of ideas. And I did what every good person does when you're made redundant. I went to Bali to drink some Mai Tais and think about which was going to be the idea I'd progress with. I went with a girlfriend, and I remember sitting there with my Mai Tai and cocktail napkin, and she goes, well, have you made your mind up yet? Like, which one you're going to do? And I said, actually, yes. And I pulled up the napkin. I said, I am going to create Australasia's best, pet product brand representing quality and la la la. And she's like, really? Cool. And so wow. I came home and I literally hand wrote myself a little note on a piece of paper, and I stuck it on the spare bedroom door. And it said global headquarters. And at that stage, I didn't even have a name for the business. And, it's quite hard to believe now that, as you've said, we operate in, 10 countries, selling to about 5,000 customers. We're Australia's most awarded pet care brand, selling about 4,500, products a day.
Wow. And did you end up moving that Post-it note or that sort of napkin to the new headquarters when you ended up with like a sort of physical? Is it still on the same bedroom door, or did it move?
I'm 2 houses on since then, actually. 13 years, 2 houses on.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd kept some of those things that make such. I wish I'd kept some of those little bits and pieces, which is a note to everybody. I wish I'd kept my first check. I wish I'd kept because they are great stories, I think, for the team. Even this morning, Sean, I said to the team, I often talk a lot about my story and I often don't tell you some of these stories. So I was telling them some of the stories this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you imbue them in the culture and actually the full journey if they've only joined 3 months ago? And how do I capture some of these sort of these pivotal moments? Yeah, it's fascinating. So you have, I guess one of the things I'd love to dig into and dig in early today is a question that I've asked you to consider, which is, what have been some of those dial-changing things that have happened in the business, whether they were decisions or strategies you put in place or major moments that actually really changed the trajectory? And of course, I'm also interested in some of the big, challenging moments. I know there's been challenging moments along the way, and you wouldn't be in business for 14 years and have no challenging moments. So maybe you could talk to me a little bit about some of those things that you think have been really pivotal in the changing of the growth trajectory of the business.
I'll take you back to the beginning. Firstly, let me say business is like a game of snakes and ladders. 1 minute you kind of like climb up the ladder and you think you're pretty rocking it at that point. And then two squares later, you've hit a snake and you kind of potentially back down on the board past where you started, or certainly it feels like it at the time. So I think the ability to bend and not break, that resilience is key. Look, early on in the piece, my earliest, I suppose, breaking moment, it was actually when my husband at the time said to me, Anneke, if you don't crack it this year, this is 3 years in, if you don't crack it this year, you've got to go back and get a job, let's face it. And that got me going. I decided that, that was the year that I just had to, because there was just no way I was going to go back. I was very successful in the corporate world for most of my career, but I'd done my time there. And so that kind of when you're forced to make a decision, when you kind of I was like, to me, there was no option to go back. So that really got me started. I think the next thing was, we had a distributor in their personal consumer products who decided they were not moving forward with pet care. And they were the company we're very grateful for that helped us establish ourselves in grocery, because getting into grocery, grocers are looking for suppliers that have a vendor number and a reputation for delivery, because it's quite high risk to deal with a small business that doesn't understand all the nuances of grocery deliveries, of fulfillment on shelf and everything else that's required. But one fine day they decided they would not do that, and we took back our distribution, which involved me having to find $1 million in 8 weeks.
Wow.
And I think at that time, it really made me think, am I actually going to do this? Like, I had to put my house on the line. I had to, and, at that stage I was a single parent. I thought, I was kind of risking everything. And there was certainly something my father had always taught me, and that is, whatever you do, you own your house. So doing that was very against my family's values. And so it took me, it's hard to believe that at the time, here we go, it's the cat. At the time, I actually sort of thought, I think I might have to, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep going. And that's why I think, having a real passion for what you do and a belief in, I'm so sorry, Sean, I'm going to have to let my
That's okay. We're welcoming the cat to the podcast as well. I think you mentioned this is a blind cat as well. Which voice box is working?
My sincere apologies. She's a Siamese cat who's recently gone blind, and so she's very insistent at either coming in or coming out of the door whenever she wants to. So
No problem.
I think that yes, having a passion for what you do is key, because invariably you hit those roadblocks where you actually kind of go, am I going to find $1 million in 8 weeks and put my ass on the line, or do I really believe that this is going to that I'm actually going to make this? And
how did you weigh up that decision? Because that is a significant, just to pause there for a minute, that is a very significant decision. As a single parent, putting your house on the line, you just think about the compounding levels of risk. You're going, okay, well, do I take on $1 million? Do I have the time? Do I have the network? Do I have the skills to find the $1 million? What does it mean for my house and for my family and the risk profile for us? It's against the family's values and everything you've been taught from sort of data. That's a huge decision. Mm-hmm. How did you, was that like a, pluses and minuses? Was it a gut check? Like, how did you actually make that decision and decide to go forward?
Very challenging, many tears, definitely the rational list making. I'm into heebie-jeebies as well, so I did my fair degree of energy healing and Reiki and other modes to try and get clear on what I wanted. And I suppose just getting really clear on why I'd started in the first place, what I'd set out to do, what I was actually setting out to do, why I was doing it, what I thought I was good at, whether I thought any of those things were relevant to take us forward as a business. And I suppose when I'd sort of started, because it took me so much longer to find my stride in business, like most people say, right? It takes a long time to get to 2 million. And then once you're at 2 million, it takes a long time to get to 5 million. And it feels like a long time. And I think I'd always sort of said, I want to lie on my deathbed and say to myself, Anneke, you gave it a good shove. I just didn't want to live with the regret of not trying. And I figured I'd already come so far. And interestingly, I think to the outside world, they would have considered us successful. But, when you look inside the business, the reality of the cost of trying to get to where you are and the people in the business, and you're actually not you look very successful on the outside, but the bottom line is representing something quite different to that. So, so I decided I'd give it a good shot.
And also, it's not a friendly working capital profile in your sort of industry. I imagine, there's many service businesses that don't realize how fortunate they are when they're getting paid up front, or they're getting significant amounts of cash early that sort of fund everything, and they can fund everything out of cash flow. There's lots of businesses that are developing products, and we spoke to a fantastic female founder recently, Elise from Eosera, a biotech business in the States, and she was talking about the same thing, dealing with some of the largest retailers there, where she wasn't getting paid for sort of 6 to 9 months after she'd put that money in to get the products in hand, and won some big volume deals. Everyone's going hooray, and she's like, yeah, but I've got to get 40,000 products out in the next 90 days, and I don't have the finance for it. Like, how do I do that? Really crazy scramble. What did you learn from that experience? So first of all, it'd be great to know, well, how did you find the $1 million? Like, what was the funding model you ended up choosing, or financing model? And then secondly, what did you learn from that experience?
Where we found the money was actually through the banks. So we use St. George as our partners now. We've been through many banking partners, and so I'm still the sole director of the business. And I'm very happy with that model, because I think part of what I've gotten very clear on over the years is that what motivates me is the autonomy to do it my way. And so how I know the fabulous Isha is that we belonged in the Entrepreneurs Organisation together. So I hear a lot of stories of other founders, just as you would have, that have had partners and taken other financial money in other ways, and it's just limited their ability to have control. And so over the years, I've gotten very clear of that. And what I think really helped me is that when I'm having a tough day, when I've hit another snake, I just remind myself why I'm doing it. And actually, it's like one of those exercises where you kind of go, if money was of no object, or you want $1 million, or if, what is it that you actually care about? And, improving humanity one pet at a time is what I care about.
That's awesome. What an incredible driving force to deal with the inevitable challenges and the big dips that come up. And I know, I've mentioned numerous times on this podcast, when you zoom out on any growth curve, it's just a series of jagged ups and downs. It's never a straight line. The further you zoom out, the more beautiful it looks, and it looks round and it looks just gorgeous. And then you zoom right in, and it's like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. But hopefully the trend is going up over a period of time. Okay, so talk to me about what else do you think founders really need to be thinking about, or I guess something that you think is instructive to others that really helped you change the growth trajectory of your business.
So some other things that happened to us was looking at, I suppose, higher turn products. So we started out quite intentionally in pet accessories, and we were able to grow by stealth, if you like. Like when we started in Woolworths, we started with 23 SKUs. And I will say we had about 400 pet specialty customers at the time. But moving into Woolworths and getting ranging of 23 SKUs, it was mainly in accessory type products. And we were able to do that because we were really focused on the design and the quality of those products and put a lot of attention into the detail. Whereas our competitors are very focused on food, and our category is secondary to anything they'll do in food. And so we were able to wedge ourselves in that way. So that really worked. And then it got to a point where we were in the door with that. And so then how were we going to grow? And so then we had to turn to higher turn categories such as, cat litter and toys and other products that we didn't originally sort of start with. The other thing that we did along the way is that we pulled out our cat litter. So we have a brand called We Kitty by Rufus Coco, and it's an environmentally friendly cat litter made from a highly renewable source that is flushable and outperforms, frankly, any of the world's litters we've tested. It's so awesome because the average cat in Australia produces 200 kilos of waste a year through its litter. And most of the litters that are actually bought are either stripped mined, which involves destroying natural habitats, or they produce a lot of pollutants, things like silicon and crystal litters. So we decided to keep that brand for pet specialty exclusively. And that meant that we could definitely keep growing the pet specialty market at the same time as growing up our grocery customers. And that was quite key to our growth. I think the other thing is people. At the end of the day, there's 24 hours in each day. And how we need great people to get things done. And I think my entire day yesterday was spent on people problems, actually. Everything from hiring to dealing with problems to dealing with all sorts of. I spent my entire day yesterday dealing with people, and so it can be really tricky, but it's just a necessary part of growth. And getting the right people on the right seats is actually something I do relentlessly all the time, and then making sure that if they're on the right seats, are they still the right people for the next 5 years, and just being, we've got a checklist where we as a leadership team say, would I enthusiastically rehire this person? And the word enthusiastic is because it's like, oh, they're really good because they know a lot about everything. I'm like, yes, but are you enthusiastically rehiring them? And, obviously we're working to always develop and grow our people. And many of them have done things that they've never dreamt of doing themselves, which is so cool to see. But
I think that's an exceptional question. I've used the same one for many years myself, and it's always really challenging when you do a gut check and go, how enthusiastic am I about that yes? Am I saying yes because I think they're sort of good enough for now, or not bad, or am I, to your point, am I enthusiastic? This person must stay on the bus, absolutely delivering heaps of value, perfect for this business, lots of growth opportunity and so on. What do you do when you're in a process, okay, and you're evaluating some team members, and the answer is no, I probably wouldn't enthusiastically rehire them again? What process do you and your leadership team go to think about what do you do now?
I think the first question is why. Is it a skills problem? Is it a values misalignment? Is it something that they did that was really off brand? Is it actually just that they're always why? So I think it's unpicking the why, and then it's having a conversation with the actual individual. So I think part of the challenge in managing people, and for your people managing their people, is the ability to have difficult conversations that are productive. And it does take guts to rock up and have those conversations and actually listen. Try to really listen to what people are telling you. And look, I would always try to solve for. So can we train this person? Can we buddy the person? Can we change the roles in the department to make it work? Because it's like I think it was Gandhi that said, if you judge a fish's ability by climbing a tree, you'll always think it's a failure. Sometimes people are actually just better placed in different roles, and if you can make that happen, then you can. And so we have a quarterly conversation with everybody where they go through their own process of seeing if they think they're the right fit according to the values of our business and according to their performance, which gets measured in sprints. So we run the EOS traction process. So it might be a helpful resource. There's a book called Traction, which is written by Gene Wickman, and it runs the enterprise operating system. And through that, every department has its own dashboards and numbers. And so everyone can see very clearly, and we can see very clearly who's on track and who's not on track. So I suppose that's the results and the skills approach. I think the hard part to train is the quality of a person, and whether their values are really aligned to the brand or not. And so I think that's a harder part. But then I think we would have failed somewhere actually in the hiring of those people because we should have better checked that. And then I will say, my girlfriend Lucinda Gamble, who I used to say, well, she won HR Director of the Year. I'm like, you won HR Director. Give me the secret formula. She's like, Anneke, she's the loveliest woman. She said, Anneke, you just don't get it right all the time. And I'm like, okay. Well, so she's saying the same thing, that, sometimes you've just got to cut yourself some slack. People are like icebergs. You only see what is on the surface. You only hear what they tell you. Everything else that's going on, is about them. It's not about what you're doing in the business or So I think sometimes you just,
I think also sometimes, it's hard when your business when your business is growing and you're thinking about where it needs to go next, and so you're asking yourself hard questions about, is this the team that's going to take us to the next level? Do we have what we need? Do we have people who know how to get to the next level? Are they the right ones to lead us to the next level? And so sometimes the business grows around the people and above the people. That doesn't mean they're bad people, and that just might mean that somebody else is needed for the next stage of the journey. And I like thinking about, I think sometimes as entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, we're often hard on ourselves about the fact that we couldn't retain all the best talent for the longest periods of time, but also there needs to be some recognition sometimes that people come into our chat, it's almost like there's two sort of intersecting lines, their life and our business's journey. And sometimes 2 or 3 years might be the perfect amount of time. And actually we should be really excited when we let them go into the next opportunity, because they were there for a part of that journey. We can make it valuable for them. We can make it valuable for us. But I think sometimes when we've really worked hard on building a culture, it can also sometimes feel like failure when somebody great you don't get to keep, but it always obviously creates space for the next one. I've got a question for you, Anneke. You mentioned to me that you got some real, not every Australian organisation who's wanted to export has successfully entered markets. And, when you're thinking about the business model you have in the market in which you're domiciled, so if you're an Australian business in Australia or vice versa, but when you go to a new market, you make a whole bunch of assumptions before you get there, and a lot of those assumptions get tested pretty fast. You mentioned that you got some learnings through your expansion overseas. Can you share what some of those learnings were?
Absolutely. Lots of learnings here. If you ever tried to walk through a door with a broom turned sideways, that's what we tried to do when we entered the States. We operate across 12 different categories. We rocked up to the States and we took a stand at the Global Pet Expo and we said, "Where is the cocoa?" And everyone came along and they're like, "Well, what do you do?" We're like, "We do everything." Like, "What do you need?" And they're like, "Yeah, but what do you really do?" We're like, "Well, we do all of this. We do this and this and this." And they're like, they couldn't quite get us. Like, it was not really sticking. And look, we rocked up to about 3 trade shows like that. Trade shows are expensive. That was stupid, but in hindsight, but we did. But what I would say that we were good at is asking questions. So everyone that would come along with, "Oh, well, what's happening in your business? Well, what do you like? Well, what I don't know." Lots of questions to try and understand what people were really gravitating to. And I think on our 4th show, what we did is we sold cat litter. We took one of our products and we went, "This is the one." That wasn't just a result of rocking up to these trade shows. We've been in the market. I could pretty much tell you what is sitting on PetSmart, Petco's, every mud bay, every retailer's shelves. I've certainly had covert photos of, and I could tell you what was on their shelves at whatever price. We would have spoken to all these different retailers, anyone who would talk to us. I would go and talk to other suppliers, brands like us, and they go, "Oh, hi, we're from Australia." I mean, that's the great thing about being a tall, blonde Australian woman, is that people are like, "Oh, your accent's the best," and we've got this way about us that's very different. They've got a very different approach. And just on that point, I would say that that's one of the things I really love about running a global business is when I rock up to do a sales presentation in Singapore or a sales presentation in America, which I don't do so much myself these days, but I do love it if someone lets me out of the office. And I have a very different style. I'm very sensitive to culture. So when I present in America, I am as big and as loud and as over the top about all our achievements as I possibly can be. Like, I find it's not my natural style. So I make myself say all these things about how a woman we are and how we're in this many things and how many, how great we are. If I go to Singapore, it's very demure. Even the way I dress and present myself, it's very demure. So I do love the sensitivities in doing business in the different markets. One of the things that has taken us, I think, just in some markets, and America is certainly one of these, it took us a while for people to realise that we weren't coming in and going out. So what actually happens in the American market is they've seen a lot of people enter, and in 3 years' time, they're not there. So the showing up and the keeping on showing up was, we're not going away. and so it was costing we were burning a lot of money, but it actually brought us credibility. And now we work with these incredible sales agents that represent us in the States who take us seriously, who are really on point salespeople. The people we were working with before were like used car salesmen, so there's a big difference because now they take us seriously and they've seen what we can do in other markets. I think there's all sorts of other things in terms of we've changed packaging for markets, we've changed size of products for markets. We had to consider for the States where you warehouse. I mean, it's a massive country with mountain ranges in between that I'd like to be skiing down right now. But, you need to consider where your warehouse is being moved around. So lots of things to consider. But I find it very exciting. I have to say I like complex problems, and certainly exporting to new markets is a complex problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So when congratulations to you and your and the business on the success you've actually had in entering those markets, because it is really difficult. And so what I heard from that is obviously many things, but one of the things right up front is just because you've got a business model that works here, it doesn't mean that that's the same product set, the same style, that's the category, that's the problem. And it's no different to figuring out your customer in Australia. It's just that you've become accustomed to understanding their needs. And so you know what it is they want, but you enter into a different market, you got a different customer with different problems, different mindset, different competitors, and all the things that you hoped were the same probably won't be the same. But that doesn't mean there's not an opportunity as long as you're willing to do the work to find it. What advice have you received along the way that's really had an impact on you as a leader, and from whom?
Firstly, I would call out my dad, my great big Dutch father. So, as a little girl and a little tot at the side of the swimming pool, he pushed me in one day trying to teach me how to swim and yelled at me to swim to the end of the pool and back. And before he actually pushed me in, he said, Anneke, tell yourself 3 times you can do anything you want to if you try. I mean, he did it more like this. Anneke, tell yourself you can do anything you want to if you try. It was kind of terrifying, like a Schwarzenegger character. And so, looking up at him, I went, I can do anything I want to if I try. He said, say it louder. I was like, I can do anything I want to if I try. He's like, say it louder. I can do anything I want to. He's like, swim. And I have to say, it is something that's absolutely stuck with me, that message. Many years later, fortunately, my father's not with us anymore, but many years later, I told him that story. He couldn't even remember the day he did that. So I think just a belief that, if you set your mind to it, and if you really want something, you can really do anything you want to if you try. Something I try and instill in my children now. My mentor, Andrew Smith, who is just the most.
And sorry, just to add one thing to what you just said about your dad, and God bless him, that's an amazing gift to have given you. And one other thing that's become obvious just through the earlier part of your story around some of the challenges that you faced is it's not only having the belief that you'll get there and the conviction, but it's also evaluating what's the price I'm going to have to pay to get it, and then actually be willing to pay that price. And you had prices to pay all the way along. Like, you had to take some really major risks. So you might have had the conviction that I was going to do it, but then you still had to go, this is a really big price to pay. Am I willing to pay that price to stay on that journey and keep going after it? And, and you found that conviction. Sorry, you were carrying on with another.
Oh, no, but that's very true, Sean, because I mentor a lot of people and they're sort of saying, well, Anneke, I don't have the money and I'm going to get an investor. And I'm like, investors often look for you to put your money where your mouth is. So what have you got? What can you put in? How can you minimize what you're planning to spend so that you can get to a proof of concept testing? It's really, at the time, I think a lot of people start out going, well, I'm going to get someone to back me and give me money. So it's not easy. The second thing I was talking about was Andrew Smith, who's been my mentor for many, many years. And he's always telling me to focus. I think like a true entrepreneur, I can give you an idea, match with an idea that goes with an idea, with another idea on top. And he's like, that's great, but let's get focused on what is bringing you money and what is costing you money. And let's grow this thing and stop this thing. And he's getting me to focus. And so what I have increasingly over time done is surrounded myself with these people that are really good at managing the day-to-day, are really good at managing the 5,000 orders and the X number of products that are now stuck on some ship that got pirated, and all the things that go wrong along the way. Because running day-to-day is not really what gets me out of bed. I like building new things, and I like solving problems, and I like the people and the product. And so he's really good. He helps my shiny penny syndrome. I would add that there are some books that I'm sure people have heard before, but Who, which is the book by Jeff Smart. It's an absolute classic. Jim Collins, Good to Great.
What can I just ask you? What did you learn from Who? What was like one thing that you really took out of that really stuck with you?
Is that it's really the first. If you're trying to solve a problem, I think you need to ask yourself, who is it, and do I have the capabilities on my bus currently? And if not, I need to find them. And then what is my process to find them? And it talks about, I suppose, talks about people being a constant, because unless it is, you won't have the right people to match whatever capabilities you need for your future plans.
I think we lost your audio for a second there, but were you saying people basically sort of talent sourcing identification is a constant process?
That's correct, what you're saying?
Yeah, I agree. I always sort of liken it to people buying property, which I always find a really fascinating little microcosm in that people take often a very small amount of time to invest in something they're going to have for an exceptionally long amount of time. It's probably going to be one of their largest assets they'll ever own. If it goes wrong, it can be painful for a really long time and really hard to get out of. And if it goes well, it can be incredibly rewarding and really, fantastic for their future potential and wealth building and options and all the rest. And it's very similar with people. Sometimes we're in such a hurry to hire someone because we've got a problem to solve, we've got a seat to fill, and so we put in a very tiny amount of effort in reality in sticking a job ad up in Seek, running through a few phone screens, having a couple of interviews, just hoping we'll find somebody good enough saying yes, and then you are now stuck with this person. Now, okay, you're not stuck with them forever, but the amount of effort and attention and impact that individual can have in your organization, positively or negatively, is huge. But I love these. I love books like Who that really help you understand and do some deep thinking about how you're sourcing them, where are you sourcing them from, what's your process going to be to ensure that you get the best possible outcome for your organization. And I think I think it can be an absolute game changer for people in the way they think about their business. Okay, apologies to our audience. Looks like we had a little technical hiccup there where things just disappeared. So we're back in the game with about 10 more beautiful minutes with Anneke. Anneke, you were talking to us about, you just finished talking to us about Who, and we were sort of unpacking some of the learnings around people and recruiting the right talent for your organization. You were about to start telling us about another couple of books that had really influenced you and some learnings that you'd got. And Good to Great was one of them, sounded like Scaling Up. Do you want to just give us some insights as to what was impactful for you out of those and what you've perhaps practically applied?
I think Scaling Up really, I suppose, chunks it down into 4 key categories, from strategy to people to cash and process. And I think that, and Vern has, who's sort of fondly known as the growth hack, really, I suppose, really gives you some tools and some frameworks that enable you to assess yourself in each of those different areas. So I found it very helpful. Even things like cash cycles. We were talking before about how long it takes to get the cash in from some customers. And, sometimes, like over the course of our time and in dealing with a lot of Chinese suppliers, just managing our payments terms to them versus how much, when we're getting paid makes a massive difference. So I think just using the tools in that book are a brilliant sort of diagnostic and solutions tool and they give you some really excellent best practice examples to go by.
Yeah. I think it's a very, if I was to think of out of 100 entrepreneurs that you might interview, I would say there's probably half who've actually read that book and are applying at least some of the methodology frameworks in their businesses for great benefit. Of course, many of them are changing it to suit themselves, which I think is always the point. Take a model, make sure that it fits for you and for your organization. But it's a very commonly referenced book, Scaling Up. I really think there's a lot of value in some of the knowledge. And what about Good to Great? Obviously there's a lot of learnings out of the Jim Collins books. People reference different ones. What have you taken from Jim Collins, and how has that helped you?
I think just
business?
in the principles of what makes good and what makes great, and I suppose it's in all the 1%ers that can really turn your business on its ear and in a way simplify it down. I have to admit, it was a long time since I read that one. I've read so many since. I'm a bit of a business book junkie. So I suppose when I think about your question, which is where do I get most of my advice and tips from, it's really, I suppose, the mentor, my EO community, which is probably my number one source these days, because just even speaking to someone about her production business, a few weeks ago, and how she was managing the COVID thing inspired me for ways that we could implement something in the first salon for our customers. It's completely non-related, but so I'm an extroverted thinker. Often I'll be getting my ideas by talking to people, which is why lockdown has me climbing the walls at the moment. The other thing I did want to share is actually just one of my best lessons has been to do the numbers first, because I'm very good at I think finding ideas and coming up with concepts and actually even selling it. I can convince you that you really need that and find all sorts of ways and figure out if you're someone that likes facts or whether you're someone that likes, you're more the emotional sell, and I'll pitch it to you in a way that will try to get me the outcome I desire. The thing that I've learned is that got to do the numbers, because all these ideas can be really great, but when you work out, the minimum cost, the resources you need to allocate to it really to pull it off the ground, how much you need to spend on the marketing, how long it's going to take you to pull off, how big that actual market is. When you sit and do the numbers, sometimes you're better off just not starting. And I think my journey through business has been, that's a really great idea, let's do that. Let's do that. And actually, I wasted a lot of my own money and my own team's time, which is also my money, in chasing down these rabbit holes that if I had spent, even a day really pulling apart all the data I could find, getting all the opinions I could find, really market testing it and putting it together again, putting down the bottom line of it, and then kind of going, well, is it worth doing it for that? And how long is it really going to take that to turn into that? How really, really long is that going to take?
And I think that it really comes down to, having a good understanding of that, particularly if you're good at selling ideas to other, if you externalize your ideas and therefore you probably get, you talk your ideas out, you're generally also somebody who can sell ideas well. And the problem with that, and that's me too. And the problem with that, as we both probably explored, is you can find that you're very good at selling to yourself. So you can develop some serious conviction in an idea that's been not through anyone who's wearing any kind of black hat. It hasn't been tested. It hasn't been through a cash flow analysis. It hasn't been through market testing. And you're like, that's all boring. We should just do it because I know this thing's going to work. It's like, yep, but somebody sometimes needs to pull you back and go, well, let's just do a bit more methodical thinking so we can, assess that better. And I think that really comes to who you bring into the tent, because you probably don't need 4 other people like you who can get people on board and get people behind an idea because you do that so well. But you probably do therefore need, a good CFO or a good CCO or, a commercial officer, someone who's going to be able to really help you tussle out your ideas and who has that sort of methodical, let's test it before we jump on.
Yeah, totally. And I will add to that to back up us types, that is that sometimes, with some of the ideas that we've run with, that the team were like, oh no, like that, not, and I decided to do it anyway. They've actually, and frankly, the whole business, when I started the whole business, pretty much everyone I'd spoken to told me that there was really no market for it. There was already products like it. I'd never get it ranged. Why would I waste my time? All sorts of things. I sort of decided to do it anyway. And I think building your own, so I think I would caution all of that with really what do you want to do?
Yes.
Because if you really believe it, if you can, and sometimes it always seems impossible until it's done. And so I think, yeah, developing your own self-belief and having courage is also part of that.
And it continues to build, doesn't it, as you get more wins under your belt, and we slowly moderate over time. But you're 100% right. If you only had people who are exceptional at finding problems and risks and reasons why something's not going to work, nothing's going to get done at all. So someone's got to be driving and someone's got to be validating in partnership together. So conscious of how much time we've got left, I've got 2 questions left for you. One is, I'd love to know what the business looks like in 3 years from now. I mean, you've had such a staggering trajectory in the last period. I mean, let's again take a step back and recognize you've been in business for 14 years. And so there are no overnight successes. And the ones that are really overnight successes are actually often quite at high risk of failure because they are often growing so quickly that they're usually the most likely to run out of cash, other than businesses that have been built through a period of different kinds of cycles and over a period of time. But when you think about the trajectory you've had in the last 5 years, it's really accelerated. What do you think the business is going to look like in 3 years? How do you think about that future?
I can see us being more global. So right now we're in 10 countries. So I can see us being in more countries around the world, certainly. I can see us diversifying our customer base. COVID has really opened up a lot of doors that didn't exist for pet products. So categories such as travel and other categories, just don't exist, or, you can't sell product in these categories now. So non-traditional pet retailers have now extended into pet, and that's something that I think once they'll experience the benefit from. And because so many Australians own pets and because they spend money on them, like their children, I think it's a category that will stay in these non-traditional retailers. Certainly, we're growing our B2C presence with lines that are not sold in the same channel, so non-competing lines. But we also have the Fur Salon, which is a premium grooming salon, like a human hair salon. In fact, maybe fancier even than where you get your hair cut, I dare to say, Sean. We get some very loved up fur balls.
Guaranteed, by the way, to be more fancy than where I get my haircut, given I've got almost no hair.
So very loved up fur balls. So, that is another B2C business that, and the grooming market is growing at 27% year on year and continuing to grow. And I think the model we've developed is really unique because it provides a very individualized, more boutique style based service. And we've got some other projects in work as well that are in more consumable categories. So lots of plans ahead.
Wow, lots going on, and some really exceptional times coming up for you in the business. So, final question for you then is a segment that I do with all of our founders who've scaled, and I want you to go out into the future, well beyond 3 years. Go right out to actually, let's consider it your yearning years. The time where you've built all the businesses that you want, you've tried all the business models that you wanted, you created all the impact in the world that you really hope to have through your passion and energy and dedication. And the CEO of the world's largest community of first-time founders calls you and says, Anneke, I've got an opportunity for you to impart your wisdom on this, tens of millions of hungry first-time founders who are just trying to figure out how to scale their businesses. They're probably going quite well, but they're actually really trying to figure out how do they get to that next stage. And she asks you to finish this sentence. She says, above all else, the 3 things founders really need to focus on if they want to scale are what? How would you finish that sentence? Above all else, the 3 things founders really need to focus on if they want to scale?
Is passion, product, and people. They would be my 3. And probably I would say people, number 1, and principally themselves. How do you get yourself out of bed every morning? How do you set yourself up for success every day? How is it that you remind everyone what the vision of the business is? How do you make sure you have the right people on the bus? But certainly the passion, make sure that the people on the bus share your passion. And in terms of product, which could also extend to service, make sure it's unique, make sure it's something people want to buy, make sure it's feasible. And I think for us, it's all about being very sustainable in our product offering.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anneke. Look, Anneke, I'd like to acknowledge the way that you've built this business. I've just loved the brand. And I think one of the things that you've really brought is such an ethical framework to the way that you've thought about how you develop the brand. So, many people will develop a product that they really love, but you've actually built a whole sort of brand and brand experience, the way your products have come to life, and they're really imbued with your own personal philosophies on actually what matters to people and looking after environments. And I think that's a real gift to the world, and exactly the kind of founders that we love to interview, because they're people who it's not just business for the sake of business. It's the founders that are having real impact in the world through their product and service. And as Isha said to me, we don't need more laptops. We need more sort of different kinds of jackets. But actually, if we've got businesses that can really change, create positive impact through the way they do that, that's a really wonderful gift for the world. So I just wanted to thank you for your wisdom and sharing it with our community today. We really appreciate your time, and sorry everybody for the little technical glitch. I'm sure we've solved that successfully. Anneke, how can people get in contact with you or follow along with what you or the brand are doing?
Oh, fantastic. Well, firstly, thank you for those lovely words. I appreciate that. Please follow me on LinkedIn. My name is a bit of a mouthful. It's Anneke van den Broek. It is a bit of a mouthful, but if you type in Anneke, Anneke, it should come up on Insta as well. So probably LinkedIn and Insta are the best ways to grab me.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. Huge thanks to Anneke. Before you go, if you liked what you've heard today and you got some value from the wisdom of Anneke van den Broek, suggest you jump on to Apple Podcasts, subscribe so you get the podcast coming into your feed. Please leave us a review. We get a huge kick out of that. All of our team does. We read every single one of them, and it really helps us improve, and also really gives obviously the algorithms a good reason to put it in front of somebody else so they get some value as well. If you'd like to be the first to know when new episodes are going to drop, or new free tools and downloads and resources, go to scaleupspodcast.com. You can pop your email address in there. You can also leave questions there on the SpeakPipe button on the right-hand side of the website. That allows you to just leave an audio message for someone like Anneke or for myself and a future guest to handle. I'd love to hear your questions about scaling it for your own business, so we can handle those on the show. If you are in love with the socials, you can find us on @ScaleUpsPodcast at any of your favorite socials, and you can see the full video versions on YouTube. But aspiring scalers, before we go, please remember, you've just heard a story of someone who's built their business for 14 years and it has not been clear sailing. It gets hard, and you know that it gets hard because you've probably already been through all sorts of hard times yourself. But as you heard today, sometimes you've got to dig deep and remember why you got into this business in the first place. The only thing that's going to guarantee that you can't scale up is giving up, and therefore you have to stay unshakable in your faith that you're going to get there, but you have to remain adaptable and flexible in your approach. And you've got to do those at the same time, which is the dichotomy that we've all got to handle, and it's hard, but it's worth doing. So you've been listening to the Scale Ups podcast. I'm Sean Steele. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week, and thank you so much, Anneke.
Thank you so much.
G'day everyone, just a couple of quick things before you go. If you have questions that you'd love myself or an upcoming guest to tackle about challenges that you're facing in scaling your business, please just jump straight on the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can record your message straight from your mobile by hitting the button on the right-hand side of the page, or you can just email them the old-fashioned way, questions@scaleupspodcast.com. And just a quick reminder, nothing we spoke about today constitutes financial or business advice. If you are considering making big decisions in your business, seek out a professional who can look at your situation in detail and make sure you're getting sound, personalised advice. Thanks for listening. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week.